I never thought a sprained ankle would be the thing that finally cracked the shell around us. It had been creeping up for months, that low-level hum of something unspoken. I blamed the ache on the endless shifts at the cafe, hauling trays of coffee and pastries, dodging customers who couldn't decide between oat milk and almond like it was a life or death choice. But the real weight wasn't in my foot. It was in the way my chest tightened whenever she laughed at one of my dumb jokes, or how I'd catch myself staring at the way her hair fell across her shoulder when she was sketching in her notebook late at night. We'd been roommates for just over a year, thrown together by a desperate sublet ad and a landlord who didn't care about references. She was the kind of person who could make a tiny, cluttered flat feel like a sanctuary. Candles flickering on the windowsill, plants spilling over every surface, her sketch pads and charcoal pencils scattered like confetti. I was the chaos to her calm, always late, always spilling something, always trying to make her laugh when she was hunched over her art history essays. I told myself we were just mates, that the way my pulse raced when she padded into the kitchen in an oversized jumper was just proximity, nothing more. Tonight, though, the flat was hushed, the kind of Sunday night where the city outside felt like it was holding its breath. I was sprawled on the couch, one leg propped on a cushion, my ankle throbbing from where I'd rolled it dodging a skateboarder on my run. The TV was on, some documentary about ancient ruins neither of us was watching. She was in the kitchen, barefoot as always, rummaging through the fridge for the leftover Thai food we'd swore we'd finish yesterday. The air smelled of lemongrass, and the lavender candle she insisted kept the place from smelling like depression and instant noodles. "You good?" she called, poking her head around the fridge door, her dark hair tied up in a messy bun that was half falling out. "You've been grimacing at that ankle for like 20 minutes. I glanced up, trying to play it cool. "It's fine. Just a tweak." "I'm practically an Olympian," she snorted, shutting the fridge with her hip. "Olympians don't limp like they're auditioning for a pirate movie. Want me to look at it?" "What, you a doctor now?" I teased, but my voice came out softer than I meant. "Nah, just Google and a worrying amount of WebMD," she said, grinning as she grabbed a bag of frozen peas from the freezer. "But I've got ice and a decent painkiller stash. Move over." Before I could protest, she was beside me, nudging my leg onto her lap. Her hands were cool from the fridge, but the way her fingers brushed my skin as she wrapped the peas around my ankle sent a jolt through me that had nothing to do with the injury. She was humming under her breath, some indie song she'd been obsessed with all week, and it felt so normal, so hurt, that I almost forgot to breathe. "You're tense," she said, her voice low, focused as she adjusted the makeshift ice pack. "Like, everywhere. When's the last time you relaxed?" Never?" I tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. Her hands lingered, pressing gently around the swelling, and I was suddenly hyper-aware of how close she was, the faint scent of her citrus shampoo mixing with the lavender in the air. "Hold still," she murmured, her fingers tracing the edge of the bruise with a care that felt like it was unraveling something inside me. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the warmth of her touch sink in. The city outside was a distant hum, taxis honking, a siren wailing somewhere far off, but in here, with the glow of the TV and her hands on my skin, everything else faded. I wasn't sure when it started, this pull toward her. Maybe it was the night we stayed up until dawn painting the hallway because she insisted beige is a crime against humanity. Or the time I found her asleep on the couch, her sketchbook open to a drawing of me mid-laugh, that she swore was just practice. She made the mundane feel like magic, like the time we got stuck in a rainstorm and ended up dancing under a shop awning, soaked and giggling like kids. "Mate, you gotta stop stealing my hoodies," I'd said one morning, catching her in my favorite black one, the sleeves too long, her hands barely peeking out. She'd smirked, sipping coffee from a mug that said Van Gogh with it. "I'm doing you a favor. You'd never wash this thing otherwise." "You're a menace," I'd shot back, but I didn't mean it. Not even a little. "You love me," she'd said, tossing it out like it was nothing, like it didn't make my heart stutter. Yeah, I'd muttered, turning away to hide the flush creeping up my neck. A few weeks ago, she'd suggested a weekend escape. Just us, no cafe shifts, no deadlines, just a borrowed cottage in the countryside from her aunt. "You need a break," she'd said, poking my chest. "Your face looks like it's been permanently set to existential dread since finals." "Maybe because you keep eating my granola," I'd teased. But I'd agreed faster than I should have. Now here we were, a day into the trip, limping along a gravel path lined with heather and gnarled oak trees. The air was sharp, clean, the kind that made you feel like you could breathe for the first time in years. My ankle was still sore, but I'd insisted on the walk, mostly because she'd looked so excited about the trail. "Remind me why we thought hiking with a busted ankle was a vibe?" I groaned, leaning on the walking stick we'd found in the cottage. "Because you're stubborn," she said, her eyes bright as she adjusted her backpack. "And because I said I'd carry you if you collapsed." "Don't test me," I laughed, despite the ache. "You? Carry me? You once dropped a tray of cappuccinos because a pigeon startled you." "Rude. And accurate," she said, nudging me with her shoulder. Her touch lingered a second too long, and I wondered if she felt it too. This charge, this thing we kept dancing around, that night, we collapsed onto the cottage's lumpy sofa, legs tangled under a patchwork quilt, a bottle of cheap red wine between us. The place was old, all creaky floorboards and a fireplace that smelled of ash and memories. There was one bedroom, one bed, and a single mattress that looked like it had seen better days. "I'll take the couch," I offered, trying to sound chill. She raised an eyebrow. "It's a bed, not a war zone. We're grown-ups. Don't make it weird." My stomach flipped. Right, grown-ups. Got it. We'd shared beds before, crashing after late nights, too tired to care. But this felt different. Maybe because I'd started noticing things I shouldn't. The way her lips curved when she was thinking. The way she'd hum when she was happy. The way my name sounded in her voice when she was half asleep. In the bathroom, brushing our teeth side by side, she bumped my hip. "You use way too much toothpaste. It's like a crime scene in here." "Your face is a crime scene," I shot back, foam at the corner of my mouth. She laughed, her eyes catching mine in the mirror, and for a moment, it wasn't just friendly. It was something. I looked away, my reflection suddenly too honest. In bed, we kept a careful distance, a fortress of pillows she dubbed the DMZ. "No crossing the border," she warned, tugging the blanket up to her chin. "What, scared I'll steal the covers?" I teased. "Scared you'll snore and ruin my beauty sleep," she said, but her voice was soft, almost shy. "I do not snore." "Tell that to the recording I have from last month's movie night," I groaned, rolling onto my side to face the wall. "Night menace." "Night disaster," she whispered back. The space between us felt like a live wire, humming with possibility. I lay there listening to her breathing even out, every nerve on edge. One move, one word, and something might shift. Then the lights went out. 1 second, we were bickering over whose turn it was to pick the playlist. Hers, all moody folk. Mine, unapologetic pop punk. And the next, the cottage plunged into darkness with a faint pop. The silence was thick, almost oppressive, the kind that made the creaks of the old house sound like footsteps. "Did you break the universe?" I asked, squinting into the void. "Wow, blame me immediately," she said, but I could hear the smile in her voice. She flicked on her phone torch, the beam cutting through the gloom. "Probably the wiring. This place is older than my grandma's teapot collection." "Great. We're gonna freeze," I said, rubbing my arms. The fire had burned low and the chill was already creeping in. "I'll check the fuse box," she said, already pulling on a hoodie. My hoodie, naturally. "Alone? In the dark? You'll trip and die, and I'll have to explain to your aunt why her cottage is now a crime scene." She rolled her eyes. "Stay put, Gimpy. I've got this." She disappeared outside, the torchlight bobbing through the window. I sat there, wrapped in the quilt, my mind racing. What if she slipped? What if the fuse box was possessed? What if this was the moment I admitted I'd been in love with her for months? She came back 10 minutes later, her hair damp with mist, her cheeks flushed. "No dice," she said, flopping beside me. "We're off the grid till morning. Welcome to the Stone Age." "Fantastic," I muttered. My ankle's throbbing, it's freezing, and now we're basically cavemen. She grinned, scooting closer. Could be worse. We've got wine, and each other. Our knees brushed under the quilt, and neither of us moved away. After another glass of wine and a ridiculous game of shadow puppets with her phone torch, the cold was undeniable. You're shaking, she said, her voice soft, concerned. I'm fine, I lied, my teeth chattering. You're not. She shifted closer, her shoulder against mine. Body heat. Survival 101, I swallowed hard. You sure? Don't be weird, she said. But she was smiling, and when she tucked herself against my side, her head resting on my shoulder, it felt like the most I. Don't be weird, she said, but she was smiling, and when she tucked herself against my side, her head resting on my shoulder, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. The fire crackled faintly, the only light in the room. Her warmth seeped into me, and I let my arm drape around her, tentative at first, then braver. She didn't pull away. You know, she said after a long silence, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been thinking about that night you sprained your ankle, back at the flat. When I was fixing you up, yeah? My heart was pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. You didn't pull away, she said, and I didn't want you to. I turned my head, her face inches from mine, her eyes catching the firelight. I didn't want to either. The air between us was electric, the pillow border long forgotten. She reached up, her fingers brushing my jaw, and then we were kissing, slow, careful, like we were both afraid it might break. But it didn't. It was warm and real and right, like every moment we'd spent circling this had been leading here. Outside, the countryside was quiet, the stars sharp in the black sky. Inside, the cottage felt like it was holding its breath with us, the fire popping softly as we crossed the line we'd been towing for months. My ankle still hurt, the power was still out, but none of it mattered. Not when she was in my arms, her laughter soft against my lips, the world finally making sense. The power had been out for 2 hours, and the cottage still smelled faintly of damp wool and the pine logs we'd dragged in from the shed. Outside, the storm that had chased us off the main road kept its promise. Wind rattled the shutters, rain lashed the windows in sheets, and every so often a branch cracked against the roof like a warning shot. Inside, the only light came from the fire Mia had coaxed back to life with a stack of old newspapers and a stubborn match. I sat on the rug, knees drawn up, watching the flames lick the fresh wood. My socks were soaked through. I'd forgotten to pack spares. Mia knelt beside the hearth, hair twisted into a knot that was already unraveling, sleeves pushed past her elbows. She poked the logs with unnecessary force. You're going to murder that fire, I said. Better than letting it murder us, she muttered. Hypothermia's a lousy roommate. I laughed despite myself. We'd been friends since freshman orientation, when she'd stolen my coffee and I'd stolen her lecture notes, and somehow we'd never given either back. 3 years of shared apartments, inside jokes, and the unspoken agreement that we were the safest people in each other's orbit. Until tonight, when the safest orbit had shrunk to one sagging couch and a single quilt that smelled like cedar and someone else's dog. Mia stood, brushing soot from her jeans. Right, body heat. Science says it works. Science also says don't set the chimney on fire. She rolled her eyes, but there was a flicker of something else in them. Nerves, maybe, or the same low-current hum I felt every time she got too close. She tugged the quilt from the couch and flicked it open like a matador. Come here, I hesitated. The rug was cold, the floorboards colder. Arguing would only waste warmth. I scooted over. She dropped down beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched and draped the quilt around us both. The fabric settled over our heads for a second, cocooning us in wool and the faint scent of her shampoo, something sharp and green, like crushed basil. See? She said, voice muffled. Instant sauna, my pulse disagreed. It hammered against my ribs like it wanted out. I could feel the heat of her arm through 2 layers of flannel, the small shift when she breathed. She adjusted the quilt, fingers brushing my wrist. Accidental, probably. I catalogued it anyway. We sat in silence, broken only by the fire's soft pop and the storm's tantrum. Mia's hand rested on the couch behind my neck, casual as a coat hook. Every few minutes, her knuckles grazed the short hairs at my nape. Not quite accidental. Each pass lit a fuse along my spine until I couldn't tell if the heat was from the hearth or from her. She leaned back, head tilting until it nearly touched mine. "You ever wonder," she said low, "what we'd be doing if the power hadn't crapped out?" "Eating cold beans by headlamp and pretending it's gourmet," she huffed a laugh. "No, I mean, if we weren't just—" She stopped like the word friends had teeth. I turned. The firelight painted gold across her cheekbones, caught in the fine down along her jaw. "Just what?" Her gaze flicked to my mouth and away. "Roommates." The word hung between us, heavier than the quilt. I swallowed. "I do wonder." She went still. Then carefully. "Me too." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was crowded with every late-night text. Every time I'd lingered in the kitchen doorway watching her dance to whatever song was stuck in her head. Every morning I'd pretended not to notice the way her t-shirt rode up when she reached for the top shelf. Mia reached out slow enough that I could have moved. Her fingertips brushed a curl from my forehead. "You've got soot," she murmured. "Do I?" My voice cracked like a teenager's. She nodded, but her hand stayed. The pad of her thumb traced the shell of my ear, feather-light. I stopped breathing. She didn't. Then the moment snapped. She dropped her hand, stared into the fire like it had personally offended her. The cold rushed back in where her touch had been. Later in the bedroom, the air was thick with unsaid things. One bed, one lamp with a dying bulb, one duvet that smelled faintly of mothballs. We stood on opposite sides like negotiators at a border. "You take it," I said. "I'll sleep on the floor and wake up with a spine like a question mark?" "Pass," Mia kicked off her boots. "We're adults. We can share a mattress without it being weird." It was already weird. We climbed in fully clothed, a fortress of pillows between us that lasted exactly 30 seconds. Mia sighed, shoved the barricade to the foot of the bed, and rolled onto her side facing me. The lamp clicked off. Darkness swallowed the room, but the glow from the hallway seeped under the door, painting silver edges along her collarbone. Her foot found mine under the blanket. Neither of us moved away. "You're thinking loud enough to wake the dead," she whispered. "Sorry." "Don't be." A pause. "Just tell me." I stared at the ceiling, heart punching against my ribs. "I can't pretend anymore." The mattress dipped as she propped herself on an elbow. "Pretend what?" "That I don't—" My voice gave out. I tried again. "That I don't think about you when you're not there. That I don't replay every time you laugh at my terrible puns, or the way you steal the last slice of pizza and look guilty for exactly 2 seconds. That I don't lie awake listening to you breathe through the wall and wish it was closer." Silence. Then the soft rustle of fabric as she sat up. "Lila, I'm sorry," I said quickly. Don't," her voice cut clean. "Don't you dare take it back." I turned. She was closer than I expected, knees drawn up under the duvet, eyes wide and unguarded. "I've been in love with you since the night you fell asleep on my shoulder during that god-awful documentary about deep-sea anglerfish," she said. I didn't move for 3 hours. My arm went numb. "Worth it," I laughed, a shaky sound. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you flinch every time someone gets too close." "Because I thought you'd bolt." "Because losing you as my best friend would have killed me faster than any storm." She rubbed a hand over her face. "But these past few months, the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching, the way you find excuses to touch my hand when we pass the remote, I thought maybe I wasn't imagining it." "You weren't." Her breath hitched. "Then why the pillow wall?" "Because I'm terrified," I admitted. "And because I didn't know if you wanted—" She leaned in, cutting me off with the softest pressure of her forehead against mine. "I want. God, Lila, I want." The storm outside faded to static. There was only the warmth of her breath, the faint tremor in her fingers as they found my cheek. "Can I?" she whispered. I nodded. She kissed me like she'd been holding the shape of it in her mouth for years, slow, deliberate, a question and an answer at once. When we pulled apart, the room felt too small for the size of what had just shifted between us. Mia rested her forehead against mine. "We're idiots." "Certified." She laughed, the sound bright against my skin, and tugged me down until we were tangled under the duvet, legs hooked, arms looped, hearts finally on the same page. Outside, the wind kept raging. Inside, the fire settled into embers, and for the first time all night, I wasn't cold. The first time I noticed the shift, it was over something stupid, a cracked mug. I'd been rinsing it in the sink of our tiny third-floor flat in Edinburgh when the handle snapped clean off. I swore under my breath, and Callum, sprawled on the couch with his laptop balanced on his chest, looked up. "Leave it," he said. "We've got 4 others." I held the broken pieces up to the light. "This was the one with the chipped rim you said looked like a smile." He closed the laptop, crossed the room in 3 strides, and took the shards from my hand. His fingers brushed mine, nothing dramatic, just the brief press of skin on skin, but I felt it in my knees. He dropped the pieces into the bin, then lingered, thumb rubbing absently over the back of my wrist like he hadn't meant to. "Still smiling," he murmured, nodding at the bin. "Just crooked now." I laughed, but it came out shaky. We'd been flatmates for 14 months. 14 months of splitting bills, arguing over whose turn it was to buy milk, falling asleep on opposite ends of the same couch during late-night film marathons. 14 months of me pretending I didn't catalog the way his hair stuck up at the back when he woke, or how he hummed off-key while making tea. That night, I lay awake listening to the radiator clank and told myself it was nothing. 2 weeks later, the rain came down in sheets. We'd planned a quiet night in leftover curry, the new season of whatever show we were hate-watching, but the power cut out at 9. Candles appeared from drawers neither of us admitted to owning. The flat glowed amber and soft. Callum found an old pack of cards. "Poker? Strip?" I joked. He raised an eyebrow. "You'd lose in 3 hands. I lost in 2. I was down to my t-shirt and joggers, cheeks burning when he laid his cards down, a rubbish pair of 2s, and said, "I fold." "Coward." He shrugged, but his eyes stayed on me. "Some things are worth more than winning." The candle between us guttered. Shadows flickered over the sharp line of his jaw, the small scar above his left eyebrow he got falling off a bike at 12. I wanted to trace it with my thumb. Instead, I reached for the bottle of red we'd opened earlier. My hand shook. Wine sloshed onto the rug. Shit, sorry. He was already there, kneeling, blotting it with a tea towel. Our heads bent close. I could smell the rain on his hoodie, the faint cedar of his shampoo. When he looked up, his face was inches from mine. "Rowan," he said, so quietly I almost missed it over the rain. I don't know who moved first. Maybe both of us. The kiss wasn't fireworks. It was the slow click of a lock finally turning. His mouth was warm, tentative, tasting of cheap Merlot and the mint gum he chewed when he was thinking. My hands found the hem of his hoodie, slipped underneath to the soft skin of his waist. He made a small sound, surprise, relief, want, and pulled me closer until I was half in his lap, the cards scattering like startled birds. When we broke apart, foreheads touching, he whispered, "I've wanted to do that since the night you cried over that bloody pigeon with the broken wing." I laughed, breathless. "You said it was roadkill waiting to happen." "It was, but you still tried to save it." We didn't sleep much after that. We migrated to the couch, limbs tangled under the throw blanket that smelled faintly of curry and candle smoke. He traced the freckles across my shoulder like he was reading Braille. I learned the exact pitch of his sigh when I kissed the hollow beneath his ear. At some point, he asked, "What are we doing?" I thought of the cracked mug, the spilled wine, the pigeon. "Starting," I said. "I think." Morning arrived gray and sheepish. The power was back. The kettle clicked on like nothing had changed. Callum stood at the stove in yesterday's hoodie, hair a riot of cowlicks, flipping eggs with the concentration of a bomb tech. I leaned in the doorway and watched the way his shoulders moved under cotton, the small scar on his knuckle catching the light. He caught me staring. "Eggs? Only if you stop looking like that while you cook them." He grinned, flipped one into the air, caught it perfectly in the pan. Show off! We ate standing up at the counter, hips bumping, stealing bites from each other's forks. When he licked a smear of yolk from his thumb, I nearly dropped my plate. So, he said, setting his fork down. Last night. Real, I said. Unless you're about to tell me it was a power-cut fever dream. He stepped closer, hands settling at my waist. Real, and I don't want to pretend it wasn't. I nodded, throat tight. Me neither. He kissed me again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the shape of it. When we pulled apart, he rested his chin on my head. We should probably talk about logistics, like whose toothbrush goes where. Like the fact that we share a bathroom the size of a postage stamp and I sing in the shower. I've heard you. It's not singing. It's a hate crime against Oasis. He laughed into my hair. We'll manage. The first week was a series of small discoveries. He liked his tea with too much milk and exactly 7 seconds of stirring. I learned the precise pressure of his thumb when he rubbed the tension from my neck after a long shift at the bookshop. We developed a new language of touches. The brush of knuckles when passing in the hallway. The way he'd hook a finger through my belt loop to tug me back for one more kiss before work. Our friends noticed immediately. You're glowing, Maya said over pints at the Beau Bar. Like, radioactive. Callum's best mate Lachlan just smirked and slid another round across the table. Took you long enough. We didn't announce anything. We didn't need to. The way Callum's hand found the small of my back when we navigated crowded pubs. The way I'd steal his scarf and wear it like a trophy. It was announcement enough. One Sunday, we took the train to North Berwick. The sky was the color of wet slate, but the beach was empty except for gulls and the rhythmic hush of waves. We walked with our shoes stuffed in Callum's backpack, trousers rolled to the knee, the cold sand gritty between our toes. He stopped suddenly, bent to pick up a piece of sea glass, pale green, worn smooth. Held it up to the light. For the windowsill, he said. Next to the cactus you keep forgetting to water. I took it, turned it over in my palm. You know that cactus is plastic, right? He looked horrified. You lied to me. It was a gift. From my mum. She thinks I can't keep anything alive. He slung an arm around my shoulders, pulling me into his side. Challenge accepted. That night back in the flat, he repotted the cactus, real this time, a tiny succulent he'd bought from the market, while I made hot chocolate with too many marshmallows. We sat on the kitchen floor, backs against the cabinets, passing the mug back and forth. Tell me something, he said, licking chocolate from his lip. Something you've never told anyone. I thought for a long moment. When I was 8, I stole a library book. About pirates. Kept it for years. Still have it. He raised an eyebrow. Rebel. Your turn. He was quiet so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I used to write songs. Terrible ones. About girls who didn't know I existed. Burned the notebook when I was 16. I nudged his shoulder. Play me one. They're gone. Make a new one. He looked at me, really looked like he was seeing something he hadn't dared hope for. Then he hummed, soft and off-key, a melody that sounded like rain on windows and the particular quiet of 3 a.m. confessions. I closed my eyes and let it settle in my chest. Autumn arrived with a vengeance. The radiator clanked louder, the mornings darker. We developed rituals, Callum leaving the bathroom light on so I wouldn't stub my toe on the way to pee at 2 a.m. Me folding his socks into perfect balls because it drove him mad when they were mismatched. One night, I came home late from closing the shop to find him asleep on the couch, a half-finished crossword on his chest, glasses askew. The flat smelled of garlic and rosemary. He'd attempted risotto again. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching the rise and fall of his breathing, the way his mouth went soft in sleep. I woke him with a kiss to the temple. He blinked up at me, confused and adorable. You're home. Missed you, I said, and meant it in ways that scared me. He tugged me down beside him, arms wrapping around my waist. Stay here. Just for a minute, we fell asleep like that, fully clothed, the crossword fluttering to the floor. Winter brought its own challenges. The shower pressure was abysmal. We took turns standing under the trickle, laughing when the hot water gave out mid-shampoo. We argued over the heating bill, over whose turn it was to take the bins out, over whether Die Hard was a Christmas film. It is. But the arguments never lasted. They dissolved into kisses against the fridge, apologies whispered into collarbones. One evening in December, snow dusting the windows, Callum came home with a tiny Christmas tree balanced on his shoulder like a lumberjack. It was on sale, he said, grinning. Couldn't leave it. We decorated it with mismatched baubles and the paper chains I'd made in primary school that my mom had saved. When we plugged in the lights, the room glowed gold and green. He stood behind me, chin on my shoulder, arms around my waist. First Christmas together, he said softly. Not our first, I corrected. Just the first one that counts. He turned me around, kissed me slow and deep, tasting of snow and the peppermint mocha he'd brought home. Merry Christmas, Rowan. Spring came with daffodils pushing through the cracks in the pavement outside our building. We'd been together, really together, for 6 months. The newness had settled into something steady, like the rhythm of his heartbeat under my ear when we fell asleep. One Saturday, we hiked Arthur's Seat at dawn. The city sprawled below,